Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is issue number 131, James Gordon Jr., as requested by Ariel, who did a fantastic series of write-ups on the Scott Snyder penned Black Mirror storyline, which heavily features James. So you can go check that out on our website, capesonthecouch.com. Before we continue, also want to apologize for the lack of episode last week. We had a buffer, and then that got cut into, and then I got sick, and it was just a whole host of things. And so there was no way that I had the capacity to record. And so we said, we're just going to have to miss this week, unfortunately. So apologies to all of you who were expecting an episode. I prostrate myself before you.
Or you could be a regular human being and say these things happen. And, thankfully we have the types of fans that are totally understanding of that, deal with it.
Fair enough. So in any case, James Gordon Jr., created by Frank Miller and Dave Mazzuchelli in Batman number 407, May of 1987. He's the son of the character we know as Commissioner James Gordon and his first wife, Barbara. Jim was not yet the commissioner when Jim Jr. was conceived and born. They had just moved to Gotham from Chicago, and Jim was making his way through the ranks as one of the, if not the only honest cop in Gotham. And as a result of this, he pissed off the Falcone crime family. And so Jim Jr. was kidnapped by the Falcone crime family. And Jim was tossed off a bridge, but was saved by the new vigilante known as Batman, because this story was told in basically the year one time frame. Batman's still very early on in his crime fighting career. And it's one of the things that endeared Batman to Jim Gordon Sr. And is one of the many reasons why they are as close as they are in current continuity. So we don't know a whole lot about Jim Jr. because he's not really a character that shows up all that often. A lot of the focus tends to be on his sister Barbara, aka Batgirl. So it's not really until the aforementioned Black Mirror storyline by Scott Snyder that we're really reintroduced to Jim Jr. And it's revealed that he suffers from an imbalance in his amygdala, and it leaves him unable to process emotions in a typical manner. And it's hinted at throughout the story that Jim Sr. and Barbara know something is off with Jim Jr., but they've never really been able to prove it or put their finger on it. And so Jim Jr. is basically, he's attempting to reconnect with his father and his sister, and he says he's on medication that stabilizes him. He's helping Dr. Leslie Thompkins. He's trying to make these appearances that he wants to ingratiate himself back into their life. And he's like, I know things were rough there, and I know I had to go off and find myself, but I want to be your brother. I want to be your son. And, I understand if you don't trust me right off the bat, but I'm willing to do the work to show that I can be trusted. Jim Sr. doesn't trust this, and he has Barbara analyze the medication. And it turns out that Jim Jr. reversed the effects, and he plans on using his connections with Dr. Thompkins to dose a children's nutritional facility to increase homicidal tendencies in all of the children who take it. We also find that he was implicated in the disappearance of one of Barbara's friends when they were younger, but nothing was ever proven until the climax of the story, when Jim Sr. finds a key, basically linking, he finds a box of mementos from all of Jim Jr.'s victims. He basically takes keys from them, including the key that this young girl, Bess, had on her. And so meanwhile, Jim Jr. stabs Barbara in both legs because she is still paralyzed at this point in the story. She is Oracle. And he also tells her that he helped break Joker out of Arkham and makes a comment that he inspired he inspired the Joker to shoot Barbara in the spine because he told the Joker that, his sister runs around a lot. She just needs to take a seat for a while. So the Joker, being the person that he is, that we know him to be, he takes that comment and decides to turn it into a sick joke. So that's a little bit of a retcon on Scott Snyder's part to involve Jim Jr. in that. But I think it's a brilliant piece of retconning.
Yeah.
And so he also tells Batman, who in this point in time, Batman is Dick Grayson. He tells Batman that empathy makes men weak, except Barbara stabs him in the eye and his father shoots him in both legs. He's alive, but he's not really in good condition. So this is all pre-New 52. In the New 52, he's an inmate at Arkham who drugged his sister and traded her to Joker in exchange for their mother. He's recruited into the Suicide Squad and he joins because he's in love with Amanda Waller. And then he ends up reformed thanks to an experimental drug, and he helped defeat the Batman who laughs. But he developed a split personality obsessed with killing redheads, all of whom resemble Barbara. But when he's confronted by Barbara, the quote-unquote good side realized what he had done, and he threw himself off of a building in remorse.
Yeah, so I started reading that one, and I don't know, it didn't connect as much as the Black Mirror story, just for me. I don't have anything more in-depth to say about that, in part, but I guess because I just felt it took a huge left turn.
Yeah, and I also think it's partially because when Black Mirror is such a well-written, cohesive story, that it's very difficult to come up with something to follow that up. Okay, what's next? Like, how do you top that kind of a story? I don't want to say that it's not for me, like, and I know Ariel's probably going to cringe a bit. It's not like a top 5 Batman story for me, Black Mirror I'm talking about, but it is a very, very good story. And it is, I would argue, again, really the quintessential Jim Gordon Jr. story, largely because there are so few to choose from. So I would say that is definitely the story to read from. Spoiler alert, that's going to be your recommended reading. Surprise, surprise. But, it's such a well-crafted story. And mind you, this was Snyder's first real work on Batman. So that's where he started, was with Black Mirror. And I know that Ariel's been working on following up with the rest of the Snyder run on Batman as part of the long box view. So I am very curious, and I will be reading along with the rest of it, provided, I can pull an hour out of my ass that isn't already devoted to 17 other things to read the rest of that, because I'm just very curious to see where the rest of the Snyder run goes. But back to Jim Jr., we're going to get into the issues. So the first thing is, even though he was a baby, there's still some trauma from being kidnapped. And it's not just the trauma of being kidnapped, it's also the trauma of being the child of Jim Gordon and knowing that Jim is perpetually a target because of his incorruptible nature, that the Gordon family by proxy has always had a target on their backs, because anybody looking to seek vengeance against Jim for being locked up or what have you is going to take it out on the family. We know that the Gotham villains are not exactly the most honorable of folks. We're not talking about Flash's rogues. Batman's rogues have no qualm whatsoever about going after family if they think you deserve it. So that's, just from jump as a child, you're born into that situation with a target on your back.
Yeah. And as you already said, and to make it clear to people, we know that children can be incredibly resilient and that most of our long-term memories are not consolidated immediately upon birth. So no, I'm not saying that if something bad happens to a little baby that's going to scar them for the rest of their life or whatever. That's not the point of this. It's more along the lines of what happens when you have an insecure household. That is not meant as an insult to the Gordons. I am not saying that Jim Gordon was creating an unsafe household. I'm not saying that the mother of the child was creating that either. and certainly the child's not responsible. I'm saying that the circumstances, as Anthony said, led to one of the major needs that we have for survival being in peril more than what is considered the typical normative range. So for most of us, we don't automatically just go to the idea of, okay, what are we going to eat next? We just either go to the store or we already have food in the fridge or we order something, whatever. And they're not dealing with that. We're not always dealing with the direct financial implications of everything we're doing. If we have a job, we don't automatically usually say, for example, in our area right now, talking about difficult weather, hurricane not exactly affecting us, but a lot of rain coming and wind, et cetera, we don't think to ourselves, oh my God, I don't have a roof over my head. So maybe it's not those things, but in the case of someone in a high profile situation, the idea that, let's not even go with the violence part with what Jim Gordon Jr. experienced. Let's go with someone who's famous and is paparazzi, or let's go with someone who has a high level job. Oh my God, I just realized what I'm about to do. So I'm going to let people in on something. My daughter had a nightmare. This was maybe a couple of months ago, where she was like screaming. She was crying hysterically. And my wife went in first because I somehow managed to sleep through it. I think we flip-flopped in terms of who wakes up with these things. But we found out that it was her saying she had a dream that I lost my job and what that would mean for her. I mean, everything that would mean for her. My daughter is still in the single digits in terms of age, and she had already jumped to certain conclusions about pretty much life being ruined. And there is no indication that I'm losing my job. There's none of that. And it was like, where did this come from? But just even the thought of it created that level of disturbance for her at such a young age. So imagine if something like that is actually happening to someone. You get laid off, something like that. Whether you think a child is capable of understanding what's going on, they know more than you think. They register way more than you think. And it's human nature, honestly, to create worst case scenario. So if you don't say anything, then that's going to be the default. You can see why that would be a problem. Because children now have the full range of all possible responses with their own young developing personality as to how they can take that. If they are someone that you would consider quote unquote responsible, then they're going to say, what can I do? And put more of a burden on themselves. If they are more risk averse and think I need to avoid the problem, then they may just shut off completely. If they are more of the fight the power, then they may actually lead to aggression that is misguided. But the point of all this is you don't know which direction it's going to go because children are such an open book and there's so many possibilities. So my point with this trauma event of being kidnapped and what James Gordon Jr. may have gone through is not that, oh my goodness, that kidnapping has scarred him for life. No, it's that it's very clear that there is a huge external factor that is beyond his control that will be there as long as he's with his family indefinitely. And he would have to develop some form of coping skills either through his own trial and error or with the guidance of his parents who, once again, not meant as an insult, but James Gordon Sr. has a lot on his plate and may not immediately be thinking, hey, I need to therapize my kid so that he doesn't automatically come up with some bad ideas from all of this stuff that's going on in my life. It's more like I need to make sure that, the roof is over our head. I keep my job. My family is at least immediately safe. And I feel that way and deal with it on that front. And hopefully my wife is doing everything she can, like within the household to keep that going. And I know that sounds a bit stereotypical, but that's partly the way it's written. And there's also, of course, the idea that the parents themselves may not be on the same page either in terms of how they want to handle it. I mean, I'll bring it back to the real life examples that I just gave. If one parent is losing their job and it's a single income household, how's the other partner feeling about that? And are they actually going to give that information? Or are they going to say, no, we have to make sure the kids don't know anything? Or are they going to just immediately say, what they're thinking, which may be the worst case scenario. So this is all a matter of not just one personality. This is a family culture. This is a family personality that develops, and everybody has their role. It's just that the child is kind of the X factor. It's the wild card, because the adults are going to adult or try to adult. And the kid is going to, that's exactly it. The kid is going to potentially also try to adult, or the kid's going to be a kid, or the kid's going to regress from what they were before, or the kid's going to try to advance more than they ever did. Whatever it is, you don't know, which I'll get to in the treatment out of universe when we get to that point. But the whole thing's to say, like, this really is a mixed bag that could shake things up. And if you don't have it on your radar, then it's not the event that could end up doing some level of influence. It's the aftermath.
Definitely. And, as a parent of a very young child, it is readily apparent to me, even though my son is 2.5, that kids pick up on so much. I see it with my niece and my nephew. And, I see it with my friends' children. I see it with your daughter. I've obviously known her since the day she was born. They pick up on stuff. And, we mock that commercial. I learned it by watching you. But so much of what kids do and how they perceive the world is through us. And my sister is very big on what she calls conscious parenting. And it is not easy, but it is always being mindful of what you say and how you're acting around your child in an effort to provide them with as much self-actualization as possible. Because I think that there's a lot of parents out there who think that it's their responsibility to boost their child's self-esteem all the time. And hot take, I don't care. It's not your job to boost your kid's self-esteem. It's your responsibility to put them in a mindset where you shouldn't have to. That's the key. It's about putting them in a situation and raising them in an environment where they understand that your approval is not the end all be all, and that your love is separate from that your love is there. It is unconditional, and their self-esteem is going to rise and fall like anything else, but that love is constant. One of the things that my sister has sort of taught me to say to Theo, and we say to children all the time, nothing you do or say will make me love you any less. We say that to our kids so that they feel comfort. But the flip side to that is nothing you say or do will make me love you any more. And so I think that there's this mindset that kids go, well, if I just act a little better, or if I'm a little better behaved, then my parents will love me more. And I tell my son all the time, I love you as much as I possibly can, no more or less. I'm already at peak level. And this is a long-winded way to say it's the parent's responsibility to create an environment for your child where they feel safe, they feel seen, and they feel that what they do and how they can act is independent of your love for them. I'm not really sure that Jim Jr. ever got that, because Jim Sr. was, as you said, he had a lot on his plate, and it's not easy being the only good cop in Gotham City. And so, and I think that was done. It was touched on a little bit very well in the Nolan trilogy, but this idea that Jim carries a lot of weight on his shoulders, and Jim Jr., for better or worse, and it's understandable, but he blames his father to some extent for how he ended up the way that he did. And again, and I feel that Jim Sr. carries that he feels that he could have done something, even though he understood that, when Jim was a baby, they're like, this is the only baby I've met who never cries. Like, there's something wrong with him. Like he and Barbara said, something is wrong with our son, but they didn't have the resources. They didn't have the time to get it addressed. And so I think that there's a lot of guilt there. And when we get around to Jim Sr., because we're definitely going to end up doing an episode on him one of these days, we can certainly talk about all of that. So I've said my piece on that. So the second issue then, he speaks in the episode, in the story about his amygdala and how there's an imbalance, there's a chemical imbalance in his brain. And the problems with his amygdala means he's unable to process emotions in a neurotypical fashion. And Doc, as you are a psychiatrist and you have the medical background as well as the psychology background, I'm going to let you science nerd out here a bit and explain on some of the things about the amygdala and why it's such a vital and I think under-discussed part of the brain.
Well, here's the thing. And what I'm about to say may sound like an insult to every human being on the planet, even if it's not meant to. There isn't that much that separates all living species, and the brain, thankfully, is one of those where you can really see, and the nervous system in general, you can really see how things get more and more complicated. And if you want to say that there truly are hierarchies, then that's where it happens. So that's the good news. We definitely have the type of brain that the entire rest of existence says, damn, that's impressive. The problem is the area that we're currently talking about, the amygdala, is something that we share with many other species in the animal kingdom. And it definitely has differences amongst all of our species, but it's not as much as we'd like to believe. Why is that important? It's because it's one of the most important areas of our brain that allow us to survive things. It connects what we know as emotion with what we know as memory. So we don't automatically just think of something or have something happen to us and can then record it and recall it in perfect succession instantly. We do not have that ability. Don't think for yourself. Don't kid yourself that that's what we do. We have something that stimulates one part that registers within our senses, be it our touch, taste, smell, sight, or hearing. And that gets encoded via neuronal channels to certain areas of our brain, not as specific as we think, but still can be highly specific. And the amygdala's role in that is basically saying, why should I give a crap? It basically encodes the actual emotional response, be it anxiety, fear, anger, happiness, sadness, all of that. I'm simplifying it right now, but the reason why it's important is because depending on what we were feeling at the time of the event that's supposed to be recalled, that is the way that it's going to be processed for decades to come. And therefore, not to exaggerate what we already talked about with what happened with Jim as a young child, because like I said, those memories actually aren't encoded, but the process of how those things happen and how you have continuously responded to those situations, that's the part that gets laid down. That's the track that, despite our neuroplasticity throughout our lifetimes, becomes less and less malleable. And from that standpoint, it means that it's also our, I don't know what you want to call it, it's our film that we compare to everybody else around us. So it's also a part of how we are allowing our expressions to interact with other people's expressions, how we register faces, how we register the idea that this person looks angry at me, therefore, how should I respond? So it's not just the idea of what your emotions are, it's how you're conveying those emotions to other people. It has to do with what we consider to be the immediacy of the response. So in other words, it's not the frontal higher cortical, wow, my bill is due in 3 weeks. I need to make sure I put that on my schedule so the next time I have a deposit from my job and, I pay my bill in a timely manner. Depending on how you have processed that before, it's more like the second that mail comes with that bill, you start to freak out, you sweat, and you go into a panic mode and nobody knows why. That's the part that the amygdala can really have an involvement. The way that it's portrayed with Jim Gordon Jr. is that because his is so strange, his amygdala is so strange, he doesn't register emotion in the way that we would expect, and therefore doesn't even recognize the emotions of others as to why he should even care. So that's why they focus so much on, as we get to the third topic, the empathy part. The idea is that if you can't recognize an emotion for yourself, how are you supposed to recognize it in other people? And in a way, it can lead to being very impulsive, because now, ironically, the things that let us know that, hey, what I'm about to do is a little dangerous. I'm not even talking from once again, a higher cognitive standpoint, just something that, as we would say, quote, in your gut, which still is in your brain, is telling you, ooh, I might need to pause on what I'm about to do, or I need to be very careful with this next thing that I say. That may not be there. And from that standpoint, it could be just as simple as saying you're putting your foot in your mouth, or it could be, wow, how'd I get into that bar fight? And I really didn't mean to get arrested, but here we are. So I'm really downplaying this a bit, because I hate the idea, which we all do, saying like this one thing is the one weird trick that if you learn to master it will, create a greater life or whatever. And the amygdala is part of a larger section of your brain in terms of the basal ganglia that also is its own pathway. It's involving rewards with dopaminergic systems. There's a lot more to it, but I figured I'll just focus on the part that the comic was saying. But we know that it's critical to how we are. And there's actually an even bigger hormonal component with this, with terms of sexuality that I'm not getting into. But there's so much more to this. I hope what I'm doing is I'm just feeding your interest so that you read more about it for yourself. But like I said, the idea that what we do shouldn't just be recorded in our brains, it should have some meaning. That's the point of the amygdala.
So back to that whole, this one weird trick thing. So BuzzFeed, if you're listening and you decide to make a bullshit listicle based on this podcast, you better give us credit, or I'm a lawyer and I will sue you. But to the point, back to what it is that you're saying, thank you for the very, very Reader's Digest-y version of that. And I'm sure that there are at least a couple folks who would be more interested. And I'll talk to Doc and we'll come up with some links that we can throw in the show notes if you really want to learn more about the basal ganglia and the amygdala and that whole aspect of the central nervous system and how that's all involved with, even as you were saying, looking at someone's face and go, oh, they're angry. Just the ability to recognize that. Some folks can't. Some folks can't. And I'm not even talking about the folks with face amnesia, who's the actual title, prosopagnosia. Is that it?
Yes.
Yeah, I remembered that. Prosopagnosia. I'm not even talking about that. I'm just talking about the folks that can't read facial expressions. Whether it's because of autism spectrum disorder or one thing or another, that they're unable to process what a facial expression means, or they're unable to pick up on body language or tone of voice. I mean, those are just basic things. And I say basic not in a derogatory sense, but if you think about it, they're so often taken for granted in the way in which you communicate with each other, that if you're missing that piece of the puzzle, it becomes incredibly difficult to function normally. Never mind what Jim does with the going off and wanting to have babies become killers and stabbing your sister stuff. I'm just talking about interact with regular folks and just interact in a human society. So much of that is taken for granted. And I'm not really sure it's going to be the kind of thing that we can ever fully redress, because I know that there is obviously, there's a push to make society more accessible to folks with disabilities and folks who aren't neurotypical and things of that nature. But there are some things, I'm just being honest, I don't know how you allow for that to make human interactions more accessible to folks. I mean, I'm just kind of just spitballing off of that idea, but such a fascinating idea for me. And folks, I'm sure much smarter than I am and much more connected in those kinds of circles are aware of, but I'm not really sure how you would ever be able to enact societal change on such a scale to allow for more clarity in how we interact with each other. I mean, I don't know, unless you just walk around saying, I am happy, I am sad. This is me expressing anger to you. Like, I don't know how, unless you spell it out, and to 99.99% of the population, it's going to be unnecessarily reductive. So, yeah. And this podcast is not going, we're trying to move the needle as best we can in certain regards. We can't do that. That's well beyond the scope of two guys from Jersey. So the last issue, and this is something that he really talks at length, or in as much as he talks at length about anything, when he's talking to Batman, when he's talking to Dick, and to some extent also when he's talking to Barbara, he says he views empathy as making people weak. And this is one of the things that Ariel wrote at length about when she was writing the Long Box View. And it's one of the things that she discussed with Scott. This is one of the earliest Batman stories where Dick is Batman. And so the use of Jim to highlight as the antithesis of Dick also highlights the difference between Dick and Bruce as Batman. That Bruce has empathy in his own way, but as we discussed at length in our series of Batman episodes, no one's ever going to confuse Bruce for being warm and cuddly. Dick is a very different animal from Bruce, and Dick does what he does, and he does it in the manner in which he does it because he cares, sometimes too much. And so in using Jim Jr. as the villain and writing him in the way that he does, this is yet another classic example of the villains being the mirror of the hero. And in this case, Jim having no emotional attachment whatsoever to anyone and viewing the empathy as making people weak. He calls, I don't remember if it's his father or it's Dick. I believe it's Dick. He says, you're the weakest man in Gotham because of the empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And that, and that's somewhat tied into the amygdala issue, but that is, I would say, a very sad view of humanity to have, to say that anyone with empathy is weak. I mean, never mind from like a toxic masculinity standpoint, just in a general idea, this notion that caring for someone makes you weak. And it's ironic. I feel badly for anybody who does that.
Yeah. I don't know exactly how long I'm going to go on this, and it may be incredibly brief, because I think many people inherently understand why this would be a problem if you thought empathy is only weakness. But to spell it out, the idea that we have a certain connection just because we all exist at a certain time period is crucial to our survival. Without that, we end up in a circumstance where we're all trying to be the last king of a skull mountain that won't have anybody left. That doesn't sound productive. That sounds miserable. I don't know why anybody would make that their purpose or their goal. I mean, even indifference would be a little better than lacking empathy. Why am I saying that? What's the difference? Meaning, if you lack empathy, it means that when something doesn't go another person's way, you're not going to try and find a solution. You're going to completely ignore it. Well, that's going to be a problem, because the more people that are trying to find solutions for others, it means that when you go through your own problem, you may end up finding shortcuts for yourself. And so you can get something back from it, even if you were the most selfish human being on the planet. If you had some level of empathy, it still can work that way. But to me, that's the most low-hanging fruit. That's the least common denominator, whatever. That's not even my point. My point is, how dare you miss the greatest parts of the world? I'm saying this as one of the most introverted people I know. I love when I am with my friends, be it online, on streaming services, or just seeing them in person, or being with my family or whatever. I enjoy that so much, because there is no other way to recreate the emotions that are happening that are consolidating in my memory to go back to the amygdala thing. I might as well just tie it directly in. That is how, not just us, not just humans, but most creatures, that's how we are wired. Because we know that together we are going to be that much stronger. We're going to last longer in terms of our existence. This is something that is so inherent to what we are that to think otherwise puts us in great peril. And from that standpoint, I'll go ahead and I'll take the other side of the argument. Well, no, you don't want to be incapacitated. I know sometimes we call it paralysis by analysis, but what about paralysis by emotion, by just the idea that you absorb so much of what's going on with everyone else around you that you can't do anything about it? Well, that's not good either. But even from people that consider themselves to be huge empaths and they have to recharge their battery at frequent times because of how they feel around others that are going through a lot in their lives, I've never heard a single one of them say, well, that means I can't ever do it again. I can't ever have a strong emotion towards someone else. No one does that. At least no one that I'm aware of that even considers themselves to be a strong empath. So this fear, I think there is an underlying fear. And yes, I'm going to say that it skews predominantly male, that if you either show too much emotion or allow yourself to think about someone else's significant emotion, that somehow you're going to end up being paralyzed or you're not going to be who you are. And I'm saying this just totally direct. And if you wanted to punch me in the face the next time you see me, so be it. That's a lie that you've been telling yourself for your entire life. And if you got it from someone else, then they were lying to you as well. I'm just putting that out there point blank. I don't know any other way to say it. So if you haven't had the opportunity to express yourself, people around you be damned, or someone else has done it to you and you just turned a blind eye, then do yourself a favor and just try and be there in the moment. You don't have to stew in it, but just sit there. Even if it's just for a minute or two, just sit there and actually come to appreciate the thing that an overwhelming majority of people deal with on a daily basis. And actually, I shouldn't even say deal with, that enjoy, that actually live that ride. It doesn't have to be a roller coaster. It can just be this very nice cruise up and down a few hills, and you could still get a fantastic experience.
And to add to that point, I would also say in regards to the circle of friends, and this may be a bit of an offshoot, but find yourself a circle. And it doesn't have to be a massive circle. It can be 1, 2 people. Find yourself people that you can express the full range of emotions with and still be accepted and still remain friends. It is so important that we keep that in mind, that we're going to have bad days. We all have bad days, but we need to feel accepted to express those bad days to those around us, and not in one of those BS, how are you doing? I'm good. How are you? If you're having a bad day, say it. You should never feel, or I don't want to say never. That's absolutist. You shouldn't feel like if I tell my friends that I had a rough time or that I had a bad day or I'm struggling, that they're going to think less of me. If you feel that way, find new friends. It's not easy. I say that full stop. It is not easy, but the freedom that you feel when you find them and when you are in that place is unlike anything I can describe. And I personally am so blessed to have so many people. I mean, really, it is, and I'm not saying this to brag because I'm fully aware of how unorthodox and how rare this is. I have multiple people who refer to me as their best friend, like multiple people, Doc included. And even those who don't call me their best friend, I am still one of their closest friends, confidants. I have numerous people that can call me up at any point and say, hey, or shoot me a text or an email message, whatever, and say, hey, listen, I need to talk about something, whatever. And I am well aware of the privilege that it is that I have to be that person for someone. But the flip side of it is that I also know that I can go to them with anything, that it's a two-way street. And it's taken me a long time, but I have managed to cultivate those kinds of relationships. And again, I am grateful every single day for all of my friends, some of whom I don't talk to all the time, but when we do speak, it's like we never left. Those kinds of friends are worth their weight in platinum. Never mind gold, platinum. And that freedom, that emotional freedom that you feel comes with that level of trust and love. And it's not something you can snap your fingers and create, but I would encourage you all to find that person or those people, your people, to say, hey, I'm having a rough time. I can be myself fully and unabashedly, the good, the bad, the ugly, what have you, and not feel judgment. And that comes with that, so the empathy, it doesn't make anyone weak. It makes you strong as hell.
Amen. Amen to that. Amen to that.
Yeah. And I mean, we've talked about it on the show, Doc and I mean, it's kind of a joke, but it's also not, like how much, we care about each other. And I think that it comes across after 130 something episodes of, the fact that we've been brothers for 25 years. There's that level there. I know no matter what, he and I, we're not going anywhere. I can be myself. He can be himself. And we've got a group of friends that we all collectively are that for each other. It's not just me and Doc. We are that for each other. And I would strongly encourage you to find those people because it is a joy. And I'll also say this, because this is the kind of person I am. If you're listening to this episode and you can't find those people, message me. I'll be that person for you. I'll help. I may not be able to talk to you all the time. Certainly, given current parameters, I can't physically interact with you, but I will talk to you. I love making friends with people. I love talking to people. And so if you are struggling with that, know that for the two guys here, this is a judgment-free zone. Like if you're having a shitty day, you're having a bad time, you can tell us. We're not your therapists, and we will encourage you to find the appropriate resources, as the disclaimer says at the top of the show. But we can be an ear and we can be your friends.
So not to get into too much detail, but since you bring that up, it's directly relevant. That is pretty much the reason why I ended up going into psychiatry. And over the years, I have learned so much from my co-host here. And in high school, one of the most vital things that he's taught me, and I don't know if I've actually ever said this to him, so this is interesting, is the idea not just being self-deprecating, because I had that already. But what I mean is it's okay to not be perfect and to interact with people in a way where there is no expectation of perfection. And we actually had made it a game at one point. Not one point. It was actually very early on in our relationship where we had a streak going. The streak was doing something stupid. One of us, like doing something stupid every single day and pointing it out and laughing. I mean, like hilariously laughing. And I didn't necessarily understand it in the moment, but now that the years have gone by, I understand that and doing it very openly. We would say it with lots of other people around. And if you've ever gone through that in high school, like that's not exactly the peer group that is going to be the most forgiving. And yet we never got flack for it. I never felt attacked, nothing like that. But just that experience let me know it's just people and what they think. That's it. There's, as long as I know that I have the people that I care about and they care about me, none of the other stuff matters. So from that standpoint, I knew I'd be okay in life no matter what. So thank you for that gift. And then the fact that for some reason people, even though I didn't necessarily even say I was, like, I would be quiet as heck, and people would still come to me with random things that they wanted to talk about. I'm like, why are you doing this? And they said, because there's something about you. And now I actually understand that from a professional standpoint, rather than running away from it. I fully embrace it. The number of patients that have said to me now, you're the first one that listened. I'm like, how the hell is that possible? I'm like the seventh psychiatrist or psychologist, whatever, that you've seen. And they say, well, there's just something different. And I recognize now that is that difference. When I say I'm listening to you, it's true. And in that moment, I may not be able to do it for every single person, and I may not be able to do it every single time, but you'll always get that one moment where you know that your time is your time. And that's something that I think all professionals can strive for. So if you're not getting that, I am not actually advocating that for myself. I'm not doing a plug here for my services. I can't. I'm working a hospital, okay? But what I'm saying is, make sure if you have your own therapist, your own psychiatrist, your own professional, even your primary care doctor or whatever, in those relationships, it shouldn't be every time, but at least once in a while, they should be able to have that connection with you. And they should be comfortable enough to acknowledge it. And if they don't, then I would advise you to find someone that does.
Truth. I mean, a lot of the stuff we did was, it was just, God, you're talking about like freshman year, right? You're talking about,
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. That's, Christ, we're going back to the fall of 1995, folks. That's what we're talking about. We're going through like September through November of 1995. 26 years. 26 years ago. God damn, I'm old. Excuse me. My I'm going to go take something because my joints are creaking. I'm going to go take my vitamin supplement and my Centrum Silver now. So we're going to pause. We're going to plug a few shows as well as our sponsor, BetterHelp. And speaking of, talking to therapists, there you go. And we get back, we'll get into treatment. Stay tuned. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Is there something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? BetterHelp will assess your individual needs and match you with a licensed professional therapist. You can begin communicating within 48 hours.
It isn't a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional counseling done securely online. BetterHelp has a network of over 15,000 counselors with a broad range of expertise. You can log in and message your counselor anytime and get timely and thoughtful responses. You can also schedule regular video or phone sessions. No waiting room required.
BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches, so they make it easy and free to change counselors if you feel you don't have a good connection. It's more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial help is available. BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today. Visit betterhelp.com/capes, that's better HELP, and join the over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional.
Special offer for Capes on the Couch fans. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/capes.
Hey, this is Ken M.
Padawan J.
Coach Duffy.
from the Ocho Duro Parlay Hour podcast. Every week, the ODPH is talking sports, movies, TV, comics, and more. It's always a parlay of topics on each episode. You can find the ODPH on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, and wherever you find great podcasts, such as the one you're listening to right now. Don't forget to check out OchoDuroParlayHour.com, where you can find the links to all of the ODPH social media accounts, links to the bands whose music you hear each week on the show, hashtag 607 podcast info, and parlay points, our companion blog section of the show. Thanks for listening to the ODPH. Now get back to your regularly scheduled podcast.
Hi, I'm Howard Mackey, and this is Capes on the Couch.
And welcome back. So, treatment in universe for Jim Gordon Jr.
Yeah. This is rough. This is definitely rough because he has already shown at the highest level that he is really, well, I'll just say it, like he's one step ahead so many times and just so manipulative and just sadistic. We didn't really get into the torture side of things. So I know we had a couple of characters where we really focused on that, but that's also in his bag. So many things to work on. I don't know if I have a great answer for this one, to be honest with you. I honestly wonder if you have to. I'm going to pull out a little bit of an Amanda Waller thing here. I almost wonder if you have to fight fire with fire. As much as he says he doesn't have the empathy and all of that, it's fascinating how he still is so focused on getting what he wants, and how he just gets so methodical with how he picks his targets. I would wonder if I could get someone with a psychological background, meaning professional psychological background, that clearly has been manipulated by someone else that he's very familiar with as well. That even if I just gave away a lot. She is not exactly in that professional nature on a regular basis. I'm wondering if just for these brief periods of time with bat in hand, if we could get one Harleen Quinzel to assist me in, I would say sit down, but that's not true, to strap down and find a way to start having a few therapy sessions that would allow for him to truly understand what he has put people through. Maybe not Clockwork Orange-esque, because I don't like the idea of having someone watch things and then give them noxious stimuli so that they biologically expose them to that. And I don't condone violence, but Harley would. And from that standpoint, I think it would be kind of a riff off of what you're going to, what we're going to talk about in our skit, but make sure that he knows that there are consequences for not dealing with human emotion the proper way. And if he isn't able to experience it the natural way, then let's see what Harley can drag out.
I think she would absolutely be game, at least most versions of Harley. To some extent, it depends on the writer. But I think the Connor Palmiotti Harley absolutely would. She absolutely would. Some of the other Harleys, maybe. The animated Harley, the Harley Quinn series animated Harley, maybe in season 3. Season 1, she's too focused on her stuff. Season 3, she's a little, or, what I'm assuming she's going to be like in season 3. She's going to be much more focused on Ivy and trying to do some good. And I think Ivy is going to have a positive influence on her in that. So I think that there's definitely room there for that. But the Connor Palmiotti version of Harley would absolutely be willing to help you out in that.
Yeah, and because it's not going to be the out-of-universe treatment, I want to make it clear like why I'm saying what I'm saying. It's basically the equivalent for what we have in my system called the peer recovery program. So it's people with addiction that, they've gone through it, but they now have a certain amount of time of sobriety and now are professional counselors. So it's one thing for a professional on my level to say drugs are bad and okay, you shouldn't do drugs. And it's another thing for a person to say, actually, this was my direct experience, which may not be the same as yours, but obviously is going to connect way more than anything that any other professional would say. And I've definitely seen it work so well. So I'm not saying that they both have had experience with the Joker for obvious reasons. And obviously they're not the same in many different ways. And Harley certainly is able to demonstrate empathy and show emotion, but that's the point. The idea, though, that there's a huge manipulative factor to everything that's going on, as well as just this sort of chaotic nature and intricate planning that goes along all sorts of things. Like, I think she could at least have a chance. I'm saying I'm really SOL.
Yeah. Out of universe, then, I'm presuming there's some medication involved.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I don't want to oversimplify it and say he's your garden variety sociopathic serial killer. But I mean, aside from the fact that this is a person that you have said on numerous occasions would not be your bailiwick in terms of treatment?
Well, the main point is safety first. If many people in these circumstances do have a trauma background, so there's always an opportunity to address trauma, be it truly direct if it's a diagnosis that carries that weight, such as PTSD, or the other affiliations of other anxiety disorders, generalized anxiety, social anxiety, obsessive compulsive, all of it. And therefore, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors being the predominant medication for that. Or if it's not along those lines and it's more the impulsivity, intermittent explosive, things like that, then maybe looking at more in generalized anticonvulsant medications that could serve as mood stabilizers or lithium. Or it just becomes something where it appears that there is a concern that the person is highly paranoid when they deal with other people because of their previous experiences of being hurt. Or they simply don't understand why people don't get them and therefore feel they can act out any way they want. And then looking at antipsychotics that may have more of an effect on dopamine blockade, or we have even more new antipsychotics that actually deal with 5-HT, which is another serotonin system that basically indirectly impacts dopamine. Like there's so many variations on that, but the point is, I'm not going to lie. Patients like this, it's going to be uncommon that they may be on some level of medication management in addition to any of the therapies that I would look to do, because that's the first step. And let's make this clear for anyone that had any guesses as to what was going on in the comic. No, there is not a specific medication that is FDA approved or even not FDA approved that deals directly with changing the chemistry of the amygdala. That does not exist right now. And so no one is reverse engineering it to make it worse or whatever. Like, no, that's not happening. And I know it may sound ridiculous to say that, but really, I want to make sure that people don't get this idea of big pharma, for all of its history, doing intense negative things. Like that's not the case. Okay. It's still people working on understanding better always. This is an ongoing process. I will say this is once again, and I make sure I repeat these things because I don't know. This may be someone's very first episode of this podcast. This is always going to be a mixed situation. And what I mean by that is it's not just one doctor or one therapist that's going to be handling this case. It's going to be a mix of many different people. If this person has had negative actions that have led to serious consequences in their life, including within the legal system, then you work within that realm. You do not try and circumvent those consequences, because the person does have to recognize that those things are important, that you're not just going to quote unquote plead insanity and get off scot-free or something like that. That is not how the system works, even if that's how sometimes it gets sensationalized. And beyond that, this is a slow process. I have never met a single patient where if they demonstrated anything that we would consider in the antisocial personality realm, or even any of the other personality disorders, where one particular therapy has now been successful within the span of 1 or 2 sessions. It doesn't happen that way. This is for that person. And to be honest, I may not say this up front, depending on where they're at, but this is a lifelong process. So knowing that, then we keep the expectations in that realm, knowing that it's not a failure if they have to switch to a different provider. It's just another opportunity for a new set of eyes and ears to help that person with their growth.
I was waiting for you to say that this is not going to be a simple process, or that this is going to take a long time, because I think at this point, it's a given. And that's why I kind of, gave as much as I did in the intro to the out of universe treatment, because at this point, we've done this enough times to be able to say, okay, I have a general idea of how this is going to go. SSRIs and a lot of time and safety. Safety, redundancies. You're not just going to sit down with them, in a regular office and go, let's talk about all the people that you've killed. How does that make you feel?
Right. But to be honest, let's bring it to more common things. It's more like, yeah, so the fact that you actually get a kick out of firing people, that's not cool. Or the idea that all the exes that you had, they deserved it? Maybe not. You know,
Yeah.
just saying.
Yeah, how about no? So we're going to take all of the appropriate precautions and we're going to get James Gordon Jr. on Dr. Issues' couch.
Hello, James. I'm Dr. Issues.
How long have you been a doctor?
Including residency, 15 years.
In all that time, how many patients have you successfully reformed?
I don't think of it in those terms. Reformed carries an all or nothing mindset. My focus is on meeting patients where they are and helping them achieve whatever measure of success they're looking for.
So none. That's unfortunately the benchmark for your ilk.
You just ignored everything I said.
No, I'm refuting your hypothesis. You were trying to set up a straw man. I just subverted you before you could get it going.
Opposite again. I would allow you to steal man. Bring your greatest argument and I could still get a positive point across. All it takes is a questioning thought and a person's automatic system could change.
You allow others to be at their strongest and barely make a dent in their psyche. Bravo, doctor. There's that baffling them with bullshit I was talking about.
I see you've given a lot of thought to this. Specifically, you spent your free time on ways to make professionals expend extra effort so you can drag them to your level and beat them with experience. I hope that doesn't happen to me, but I know it won't happen from one session. This is refreshing in a way because you're so brazen about it.
I recognize the don't argue with an idiot cliche when I hear it. How juvenile can you be?
I'm a big kid at heart sometimes. Look, I know you're intelligent, so I didn't think you would be offended by an obvious joke. If you were, then I apologize.
Shame. Big kid apologizing? I'm sure that draws people to your humanism, but it doesn't make them listen to your advice. It makes them question why they don't just listen to their own child. At least that's someone they can care about. You're insignificant to them, and they don't matter one bit to you.
Whoa. I care about my patients, okay? I wouldn't do this job if I didn't care about each person I see. I just have my own boundaries so I don't drain myself every day.
Draining yourself. Another frailty. You can't handle the basic burdens of a layperson's life. I see it. I see it on your face. You're sweating. Your skin is almost slimy. It's pathetic.
I didn't come to your cell to be insulted.
So where do you
Where do you
usually
usually go? Oh man, that was so easy. For someone trying to knock me as weak, you still took the bait for a bad joke like that.
Oh, I learned a long time ago that finding a basic connection with someone can make future endeavors much easier with them.
Okay, this whole time, you've said you don't think my field is worth it, but you're talking about future sessions. I'm missing something.
You're missing everything. This is not a session about therapy. This is a session about strategy. Oh, I tried being subtle with your kind before. It almost got me killed. I play with medicines like candy. If you let me, I could make almost any inmate be your most compliant patient. Suffering is the strongest motivator. Take your benzodiazepine or drink bleach. Here's an antipsychotic or barbed wire wrapped around your genitalia. Their choice, but either way, they're following a treatment plan.
I know I'm supposed to have some big emotional reaction to what you just said, but I'll be honest, my own warped brain doesn't really allow for it. Therefore, I'll just say it plainly. Torture is not a treatment modality.
But it can
And for people unlike you, it's not fun.
be. Well, that's the first time so far that you've correctively preempted me. It's likely your last, in part due to your own flaws again.
I already told you, one session won't make me drained. I'm not as weak as you think.
Care to wager?
Ah! What on earth was that? My arm?
That, oh doctor of medicine, is a rare toxin that absorbs rapidly through the skin. I picked up a thing or two while I shared a cell with the Joker. I believe you've met. You have roughly a few minutes to experience all your sensations leaving your consciousness and put you into a state of, what was that term? Locked in syndrome? I thought what I did to Barbara made her world slow down, but to suspend yours forever, I could have never dreamed of a better opportunity. And if it affects you too strongly, you'll die. Details. Oh, and don't worry, I know it works because I already disseminated it on the staff and guards in a less noticeable and low potency form. They're as weak as kittens right now, and you don't even know it. I'm sorry, what was that? It's hard to hear you from this end of relevance. Have you changed my thought pattern yet?
My pen. Get my pen.
Oh, this? Oh, that is a fancy pen you've dropped, isn't it? Monogrammed and everything. You know, you come across more humble than that. Looking to write a last note to loved ones? Oh, I see. Probably a backup plan for you to activate in case of an emergency. I'll just take it for myself then.
Or you could activate it yourself because it's bio-coded to me. Oh, no. No monologues, okay? You did yours already, all right? And by the way, I'm declining you as a patient. All right, we're done here.
So I'm assuming the pen also had some sort of an antidote?
Okay, so here's the thing, and I apologize to everyone here that isn't, familiar with this sort of thing. When I worked with the Joker and I got shocked, I kind of realized that anytime I'm dealing with someone that also has had encounters with him, I need to find some way. He noticed, and yet he didn't do anything about it. Why was I so slimy? Because I actually did have some protective barrier right against my skin. If he had noticed that my hair was matted down, it's kind of similar to most things that you use pre-surgery, but it's clear. So he really didn't notice, other than I looked like I was covered with like a lot of sweat. So, whatever he was going to use, I thought it was going to be electric based because that's, like I said, my Joker experience, but he used something that was chemical, which actually makes a better barrier. So I was totally fine. But once he explained what it was, I knew I had to kind of go along with it. And yeah, I wouldn't use a pen that's going to shock myself, clearly, but he didn't know that it was going to knock him out. Just one of those nice little Batman tricks I picked up.
Wow, so that's a callback to an old episode.
Hey, what's that saying? You live and you learn.
Wow. So go back and listen to the second episode then on the Joker and listen what it was like when we used to improv the skits.
Amen.
So as I mentioned earlier, recommended reading for this episode is going to be Black Mirror. And I would also recommend that not only wait until you're done reading the comics on the DC Universe Infinite, but then go to our website and read the long box view. It's a 3-part column that Ariel did. And then listen to the interview she did with Scott Snyder about the story. And we need to talk to Scott one of these days because that would be like just a huge get for us.
Yes.
I'll talk to Ariel and see if we can finagle that and making that happen. So upcoming episodes, we're going to shift the order just a little bit. We're going to do Shang-Chi since the movie's coming out next week and all. Side note, it wasn't until the trailers for this that I realized it's pronounced Shang-Chi and not Shang-Chi. But, it's my white American ass going Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi, and then Crystal, and then Emma Frost. So those are the episodes that we've got coming up. We mentioned the website, capesonthecouch.com. All of our episodes and all of the stuff is available there. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Capes on the Couch. If you'd like additional content, including some early access and a whole bunch of other stuff, you can go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/Capes on the Couch. We've also got links in the show notes. And that's if you listen to us on a platform that allows you to like, rate, and review, please do so. Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Stitcher, I believe, are the primary ones, because that's how more folks find us. The more reviews we get, the more ratings we get, the higher we climb and the more visible we get. And then we can continue to grow and expand the show. So that's kind of what we're all about. So that's all I've got. Doc?
Oh my God. I apologize for using a pun again, but I definitely have to say that James Gordon Jr. was a dick and deserved no grace, son.
Repeat. Okay. Well, listen, if it's good, it's good. For Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.